Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my show. My name is Esala Andayi. I'm a Kenyan. I'm a healthcare practitioner, and I'm here today to talk about the workplace. This is my show. This is my first video, and I just want to share a little of the knowledge that I know about workplaces. I'm going to focus more on occupational health. But before that, maybe I need to give you a little foundation of myself. Before I actually became a healthcare practitioner, there was fairly a good distribution of, siblings into other, sectors. But there was nobody with, within the health sector. So it became like a necessity that somehow somebody had to go into the healthcare field. Actually, I wanted to be an IT expert because I was a computer addict. But you may say I was forced into being a healthcare practitioner, and it is rather a forced decision that I have never regretted. So I'm very glad to be here. I'm actually a registered clinical officer, a Kenyan. I'm also a health systems manager by profession, and I'm also an occupational health and safety practitioner by occupation. I have also done further studies in industrial hygiene, which is basically a part of occupational health and safety, but it mainly focuses on the chemical, physical, and biological hazards, other dangers that entail a workplace. So I've also specialized in that area. At the moment, I'm also doing a few other trainings on environment. You understand that we cannot separate health by any chance with the environment. The two of them, they interact very closely. One will affect the other and vice versa. So welcome to my show. I will take a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes, just a free talk, just share free knowledge, nothing technical. I'll make everything so easy. If there is any area where I find maybe someone may not understand, and I'm very sure also, on my channel, if you have any question, you're free to ask. You're free to even challenge me if I say anything that you research and you find out, no, this guy was lying to us. So it's just a free talk. I've also done a lot of trainings in occupational health and safety, and that's why I feel like a forum like this, just being on the internet and talk to people, I think, who knows, maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. But you as my viewer, if you can stop for a minute and just watch what I'm going to talk about, I think I am glad. So if I find 10 people who have watched this video, 5 people, 20, 100, 1,000, I'm glad. Alright. So, what is occupational health and safety? I will not just go direct to the explanation. I will start with some basic information. Then the information will just derive a definition for occupational health and safety. Now, one of the very important social elements of human life is health. My friend, you need health, you need your food, you need your shelter. It's like a basic need, all right? Without which you won't be okay if you will be there, because you can as well, suffer death or something if your health care is not taken care of. And where does these health issues come from? It is our environment. Think of any condition, it's caused by environment. Directly, indirectly, it's always about the environment. So that's why you can't separate health and environment. We also look at another facet of the three, which is safety. What is safety? Safety is just freedom from danger, being free from any harm or any danger. So those are simple ways you can look at occupational health and safety. But now we are using another word called occupational. Occupation. We're not just saying health and safety or environment. We're talking about occupational. So what does that mean? It means workplace. However, it's a legal term used to mean the ability or rather the eligibility for economic compensation. That's when we talk of occupational. But if there is no legal basis for economic compensation, then we simply say work related. So work related is a broader term that means anything that is relates to work, whether it is directly caused by work, whether it is influenced by work, whether it is made better by work, whether it is worsened by work. That's all what the word workplace, work related means. So, what am I doing in the workplace? As a registered clinical officer, I'm supposed to be in hospital. I'm supposed to be in a ward. I'm supposed to be in an outpatient department somewhere. I'm supposed to be in the laboratory somewhere. I'm supposed to be in the theater somewhere. What am I doing in construction? I'm simply narrating the question that everyone asks me. I have a good sister of mine, and one day she asked me, "Our dad trained you to work in a hospital. Then why did you decide to go into construction sector?" Now, when you think of construction, you think of, manual work and stuff like that. Trust me, the construction sector is like any other place. The offices with places to sleep, with a field outside where you need to work, with teaching or rather lessons, trainings and stuff like that. And of course, where there is people, there is healthcare issues. We just said health is a fundamental need. I'm a lawyer, so if I say fundamental, I think you can understand. So I'll go back to the history of occupational health and safety. Now, back in UK, when you think of occupational health and safety, trust me, you will have to look at history and you'll go back to the UK because you wonder, what is this? How did it come? Who decided that it is a useful, part of healthcare? Like, who decided? So you want to know a little bit more history about where this sector came from. Now, one of the things I want to explain is the history of occupational health and safety. So back in UK, in the late 40s, early 50s, that's when the occupational health and safety issues started. They might have started long ago, but this is when they got recognized as an important facet of healthcare. All right. So back in those days, there were women who were working in construction sector, and there were also kids, small kids working in construction sector, or let's say any other workplaces. Because we used to have so much areas being more industrial, like industries, factories, than more of building structure and stuff like that. So there was a lot of upheaval in industrialization, and that meant there was a lot of human labor being involved in these tasks, and so equipment, and so any other resources that were required. All right. And when I talk of women and I mention construction sector, I think something tickles your mind. It's almost like you get a little bit nervous. Because construction sector, think of manual work, think of the work people do using their hands, think of, carrying blocks, bricks, sheets of metal, beams of metal. You think of a lot of manual work. And for sure, there was a lot of manual work. Because you will appreciate, now we have a lot of use of equipment, or most of our operations are mechanized, but that hasn't been the way it has been yesterday. It is better today than yesterday. I mean, there's more equipment being used than yesterday. So you are sure yesterday there was more manual work than today. If I may bring that picture much closer. So that's what happened. So now the women, they are classified into the vulnerable group. If you look at ILO, International Labour Organization, which is an agency of UN. International Labour Organization, it has like 4 functions, rather 3. So one, it is employment, all right? The second is social protection. The third is social justice, all right? So social justice is basically to do with, fairness, being fair to everybody in terms of distribution of resources, recognition, and all those stuff. Social protection is protecting them from risks, right? It can be health risk, it can be economic risk, it can be moral risk, can be any risk, all right? So that's what social protection comes in. And of course, everybody needs a job. So it is employment, whether it is self-employment or it is employment, like, what's the opposite of self-employment? Is it employment? Right. So those are functions of ILO. There's an additional one, but it's not of my interest. Now, women, social protection looks so much at vulnerable individuals, all right? Disabled people, women, children, people actually who are illiterate, things like that. Because these are people who are vulnerable to unfairness, unfair treatment, injustice, right? So the women and the children back in the UK, they needed protection. And the protection came as a necessity because you realize the physical capabilities of a woman and a child is not the same as an adult and a man, right? There's a big gap. It is natural, it's not demeaning women in any way. They know that, and that's why we are protecting them. We have women right in the Millennium Development Goals. It should be the second or the third, can't remember clearly. There is something to do with gender equality. In the current Millennium Development Goals, there is gender equality. If I come back to my own nation, there is an element of social protection. Even in the Constitution, women are mentioned. You go to, even the Vision 2030, for example. Social protection is a very serious facet of that Vision 2030 program. So the women needed to be protected. So the inability to have the same physical capabilities as a man meant that women were more vulnerable to injuries and to injustices. And what happens when there is an injustice in the workplace? Have you ever gone to a workplace and then maybe if nobody loves you? Have you ever walked into a workplace and then you feel like many people don't like you, or they don't recognize you, or they're fighting you, something like that? How do you feel? You get stressed. Do we all know the causes of, rather the effects of stress? Do we know? Do we? We will come to that as we continue. But just to mention, think of cancer, think of high blood pressure, think of cardiovascular diseases, other cardiovascular diseases. All those, they have a link with stress as not causal factor, but risk factor, right? So the women were not able to do the work as much as men also. That's now physical capability. They were not able to do work just as men. So they were more vulnerable to injuries, all right? If you have a job that is rather demanding more than what you can deliver, more than your capability, it means you have to overstretch. You have to work beyond your safe capabilities, all right? And as a result of that, when you subject your body to more than enough, then you are prone to injuries, you are prone to diseases, and all those. So women needed protection. And this came as a necessity, not a choice. It's not like somebody sat and started thinking, what can I do? Is there anything I can do just to improve this workplace? No. The issue was, this is the problem. What can we do to protect these women? And it started like that. And then as a result of that, policies have to be created. We all know that for you to run anything, even your home, you have to set some policies. You have to say, I will not come to the house at 10 every day. If I'm leaving work at 5, I'll try arrive early. You have to say, my kids cannot take alcohol. You set policies even without noticing that those are policies. You have to say every Sunday, for example, you have to go to church, right? So your family grows with a certain culture because they have a guideline, which I may call it a legal, in brackets, guideline that they have to abide to, they have to respect, all right? So it came up as a policy had to be created. And this policy was just simple policy to protect women and kids. But subsequently, it was like, we are protecting the women, but what about, what are we protecting them from? Protecting them from not just the physical aspect of work, but also the people, the social aspect. So how can I protect you from someone without dealing with that someone? Actually, the best way to handle a problem is handle the root cause. So they had also to prepare, to expand their policies for all workers. I'll give you a very simple example. I'm protecting a woman from, let's say, sexual harassment. And I'm not giving the assaulting person, I'm not giving that person any knowledge. I'm not, developing policies against sexual harassment that are aware to that person. I'm not training that person. I'm not telling that person the relevance of, respecting another gender. I'm not teaching that person about a law that they must follow. Then how do you protect me if you don't protect, rather deal with the source? So it meant that all these policies, the health and safety policy, of the rules, regulations, guidelines, they had to incorporate every other worker, regardless of gender, age, and all that. All right. And slowly there has been a very big transformation since then. And now if you look at UK, they came up now with a good law from which we've borrowed most of our policy or health and safety policies from. Came up with a law called Health and Safety Act of 1970 something. Why they call it Health and Safety ETC Act, I have no idea. Trust me, I'm a scholar in occupational health and safety, but if you look at that act, you'll see they call it Health and Safety ETC Act, ETC of etc. Doesn't make sense. So anyway, that's what happened. Now let me narrow that down into closer to us. Come back to Kenya. Have you ever heard of occupational health and safety? I think maybe I've not done research, but I believe it may not be more than 30% of Kenyans who are aware of occupational health and safety. And when I say of Kenyans and talking about awareness, I'll probably think of an adult. As a medical practitioner, an adult is anybody from 12 years. Actually, at 12 years you can conceive. At 12 years you can impregnate somebody, those puberty stages, all right? So from the age of 12 years all the way to the rest of the lifespan of each individual on average, I don't expect more than 30% of Kenyans to be aware of occupational health and safety, so-called also environmental health and safety. All right. So in Kenya, policies have come up, and I want to tell you why policies have come up. Now, I will not get there before I explain to you how serious this issue is. All right. Why is it a serious issue? Is it just because someone wanted to protect women and children back in UK? And then what? What about Kenya? So why am I even here on this platform trying to explain something? That's the area I want you to concentrate. Before that, let me sip my coffee. You can have a sip. Now, how serious is occupational health and safety issues? Now, we know that one of the largest agencies that deal with healthcare research or other healthcare issues globally, well recognized, there are very few. You have Center of Disease Control as a small one, mainly US, but doing a lot of such internationally. Then we have the World Health Organization. All right, as it goes, World Health Organization. Okay, and then now we have another one called ILO, International Labour Organization. So International Labour Organization is a UN agency, just like a WHO. Something you didn't know, and this I am sure you didn't know. The International Labour Organization is a UN agency. I am sure you expect that UN was formed before ILO, but you are wrong. You are very wrong. Actually, ILO is 29 years older than UN. Then somebody will wonder, then how did it become a UN agency? I thought UN created ILO. How? ILO was created in established in 1919, all right, when there was no UN. And after 29 years, UN came in place, and ILO managed to join UN, so it became an agency of UN. ILO has like four key roles. So one is social protection, social justice is two, and you have employment. There's a third one, the fourth one, which is not for my interest. And I said social protection, think of protecting the vulnerable people like women and kids. Think of now a healthcare worker in general. Social justice, just being fair to everyone, all right? So that is the work of ILO. And so remember, employment. So employment brings in now an element of the workplace. So social protection, social justice for workplaces, in the workplaces for workers, all right? So that's how the ILO comes in. Now, ILO has done a lot of researches, and one of the best basic statistics ILO has done is about the burden of occupational health issues. But remember, it is basically more focused on injuries and diseases. What somehow happens to the employer, economic element of losses, ILO is not so much interested in that, right? ILO is so focused on people more than businesses, because I am sure there's another agency that is dealing with businesses and corporate sector. So the ILO has found out that, has done researches, my friend, in every just 15 seconds, not minutes, seconds, a worker dies from an occupational injury or disease. Are you frowning your face right now? Like you're wondering, did I hear 15 seconds? Like, really? Now, how many are those in 1 minute? Well, I never liked mathematics. I just loved mathematics because of statistics and research and, now small other things that just forces me. Everything you're reading is statistics. You can't avoid it, man. It's like oxygen. I have no option. But even if I'm not good in mathematics, at least this one I will not go wrong. So those are 4 deaths every 1 minute. 1 minute is 60 seconds. 1 death every 15 seconds, that means 4 every 60 minutes. 60 minutes, right? So if 60 minutes 60 seconds somebody dies, 60 seconds or 1 minute, you have 4 people who die from occupational injury or disease. What about 1 hour? It is 4 times 60, which gives you 240 deaths per hour. What about a day, which has 24 hours? It is around 5,670 deaths, my friend, per day. Is this a small figure? These are global statistics, not Kenyan, it's global. Kenya included, but they are not Kenyan. It's global statistics. ILO. Remember, Kenya is a member state of ILO. So 5,670 deaths. Am I right? Let me do some mathematics on my phone. Am I right? I don't want to lie to you, man. It's long since I read these statistics. So we said we have 240. Then we are multiplying by 300. We are multiplying by 300 and rather 24. Yes. So it is 5,760. Slight correction there. 5,760 deaths every day, my friend. Day. Right? ILO itself actually estimates as 6,300 fatalities every day. If you want to go more and more, you can look at it from an annual perspective, right? That would come to 2.3 million deaths. Every year you lose 2.3 million people as a result of a workplace. Don't you think that is a serious issue? Don't you think? How many people die from cancer, which is increasingly becoming a leading cause of death everywhere? How many people die from, let's say, in Africa, from HIV, for example? Because I know there's a high rate of HIV in Africa than elsewhere. Man, I don't want anybody to tell me that because it upsets me. But unfortunately, that's the truth. Alright? How many people die from acute respiratory illnesses like pneumonia, including kids? How many people die from diarrheal diseases like cholera, typhoid, and stuff? Do you want to look at the figures and compare? You will be so shocked because you'll find those figures lower than what you're talking about. Maybe HIV cases may be closer to the 2.3 million globally, but I will not be surprised if it's still lower than that. Are you trying to say occupational fatalities, they are endemic? They are an epidemic rather? Because if I have a case, other condition, or a disease that kills more people than acute infections, then how can we classify that? That's an epidemic. That's an outbreak. It is that serious, right? So these 2.3 million people are workers who die every year from workplaces. Now I want you to remember, most of the occupational deaths, they happen in Africa. If you look at percentage, if you look at numbers, it may not be right. Rather, there might be more numbers out of Africa than in Africa, right? Because, for example, Asia records very high rates of deaths from the workplace. Think of China, India, Pakistan. They record very high mortalities from workplaces, very high. But also their population is several times our population. So even if their percentage may be small, but if you count the numbers, you'll find more deaths than in Africa. But if you count the percentage, there's more percentage of deaths in Africa than in the rest of the world. All right? So that's how serious these occupational issues are. And that's just looking at fatalities. I have not spoken about the rest of the people who get injured or sustain, occupational get occupational diseases or infections from their workplaces, and they get maybe disabled, temporary, permanent, whatever. We haven't spoken about them, but that is in the bigger proportion. I think it might be 9 times more than the deaths. The deaths is just a 1% of all the cases that happen in the workplace. So that is it. Now, let me be a little bit specific. Do you know malaria causes around 375,000 deaths per year in Kenya? No. Globally, malaria causes around 375 deaths. All right? I hope that's the figure I remember. And occupational issues, 2.3 million. How many times is that? Around 5. Around 5 times. Now, which one is more serious than the other? Is it because we've put a lot of efforts to curb acute infection? Yes. But what are we doing about occupational sector? Nothing. Now, I'm sure where you're seated, you're asking yourself, no, this statistics is not true. And one of the reasons that may make you believe so, which I expect, is because you have probably seen more people dying from malaria with your eyes, leave alone figures that ILO did or they are somewhere. What you have observed, you've observed many people die from TB, HIV, malaria, than whatever I'm talking about. But I'm saying occupational cases, they are more than these other cases. How? This is the reason I will tell you. What happens when somebody gets injured? It's obvious. If I am seated here, my roof falls down and hits me, it's obvious. You will see it. You will probably hear me crawling on the floor, moaning in agony. You will be able to see the movements around me. So it is a very obvious. Injuries are very obvious. Visibly, they are very obvious. But diseases, my friend, most of them, they take a long time to develop. Unfortunately, occupational diseases, they take 10 or more years. Some will take shorter, depending on which type, but a majority of them, they take 10 or more years to develop. Think of occupational cancer, think of high blood pressure conditions, think of hearing impairment, think of visual impairment, think of, anything. All these diseases, they develop progressively, rather insidiously, gradually, over a long time, what we call chronic diseases. And anything that comes slowly is either incurable or it's very difficult to treat. That one we'll all agree. It's not just like a relationship. If you just meet a lady or a guy somewhere and all of a sudden, man, you're partners, and after a week you guys are getting married. Oh, those marriages, most of them, they don't last. As a scientist, I rely on statistics. So I don't dispute that there are some exclusive cases where such marriages, for example, they'll work very well. All right? But as a statistician, we use the sample and use percentages. So looking from that point of view, most of those marriages might not work. And that's what happened with diseases. Those diseases that take longer time to develop, they are difficult to treat. You know why? Do you know why? Because when they start developing and you don't have symptoms, one, you won't even recognize there is a problem in your body. Especially as Kenyans, we rarely go to a health facility just to be checked if you are okay. People are like, oh, I'm okay. Why do I need to go to hospital to check? So these are diseases, they develop over time. Then after they have developed, they create, they start damaging your cells, what we call anatomy. Diseases are caused either by chemical changes in your body, what we call physiology, like the function of your body changes, or the anatomy, the structures, they change. So when your structure is affected, this is your eye. Your eye is supposed to have the function of the eye, that is physiology. Your eye is supposed to look like an eye, even if I put it on a microscope. But if it gets harmed, those cells of the eye will change. So they will not be functional, 100% functional as cells of as they are supposed to be. All right? So that's the structure changes. That's what we call anatomy. So long-term diseases, and this is, I'm very specific about occupational diseases, they cause structural changes in the body. Most of structural changes, they are incurable. Right? Think of cancer. What is cancer? Something has happened with your DNA. DNA of those cells, there is overmultiplication of some cells, which is difficult to control. So you have to kill those cells and their source, their precursors. That's a simple explanation how cancer happens, alright? What happened when you lose your ears because of a noisy equipment, for example? What happened? Now it's not just some chemistry has changed in the ear, no. It is your ear structures which have changed. The structure of your ears has been affected. And some of them, they're incurable. Alright? So you realize occupational diseases, they become a very big concern. Now, I want to tell you something. Did you know that 85% of occupational cases, that's disease and injury, are diseases? Did you know that? Did you know that? 85, 5 times occupational injuries is the number of occupational diseases. So out of the 2.3 million fatalities globally from workplaces, only around 370 is occupational accidents. The rest is occupational diseases. Now again, you'll wonder, I've not seen anybody with that disease. Somebody I know. I haven't seen anybody at home. I haven't seen anybody anywhere. I don't know any friend who has died from a disease, occupational disease. So you will ask yourself, is this statistics true? This is the explanation. I said, when an accident happens, it's obvious, highly visible, everybody recognizes it from movement, direct observation, what people say, it is a big thing, all right? But a disease develops over a while, and most of the time is not noticed. And remember, occupational diseases, they are structural diseases, most of them, and they develop for over 10 years. And these diseases can also happen outside the workplace, can mimic other conditions that happen outside the workplace, right? And so it's very difficult to differentiate and say, this disease was caused by the workplace and not any other place. It's difficult to bring that distinguishing boundary and say, up to here, this is an occupational disease. Up to here is not an occupational disease. For example, if you get lung cancer from, maybe asbestos or something, and you get somebody else gets lung cancer, both of you will manage for lung cancer. When you get to the doctor, nobody is gonna check. I don't mean nobody, but when I say nobody, I mean like, there is no obvious interventions that have been incorporated in the health sector. I don't know about other countries, but in our nation, whereby if an individual has a chronic disease, the cause of that chronic disease can be checked. Objectively be checked in a lab, by some form of surveillance. We don't have that level of initiatives. It's not there. So you'll be managed like any other lung cancer patient. The conclusion is this guy has lung cancer. What caused lung cancer is speculative. Are you a smoker? Yes. Oh, the reason is smoking. Are you a smoker? No. This guy, the family has somebody who has who had cancer, so anyway he's at risk of cancer. Nobody really goes into details to look at what caused it, because there is that belief that it will not change the management. A healthcare practitioner in a health facility is concerned about personal health, not community health, population health, public health, where occupational health and safety mainly falls. Alright? So they will manage you as an individual. They'll manage you as an individual. So the cause and what caused and the environment where we come from and the workplace relatedness is not their issue. Okay? So that's the problem now. So these diseases develop, you never know. And you'll get lung cancer. How many people have you seen with lung cancer? Now, not even lung cancer. How many people have you seen with cancer? Be it throat, liver, pancreas, bladder, whatever. Did you know that there are good occupational causes of these cancers? And occupational health, occupational area, rather the workplace, is one of the major causes of these diseases. Do you know that? Now you know. So that's why we never differentiate. We never see a lot of diseases that we can conclude as occupational as opposed to injuries. We give more attention to injuries. So today, I am telling you, there's a big problem. It is a hidden problem. I like the Kenyan politicians when they say, there is an elephant in the room. Now there is an elephant in the nation. This is a hidden area. Now, When somebody get injured, think of direct and indirect cost. Somebody get injured, let's say they get paralyzed, they can't work, they have to be paid, so there is a cost issue, there is investigation, there is reputation of the maybe organization where he was working, the family suffers, the psychosocial torture, there is issues like inability to continue creating income. Sometimes insurance doesn't compensate. Sometimes nobody knows there is a law that is supposed to compensate you, rather a law that you're supposed to follow so that you receive compensation from your employer. Some of these laws, they also have loopholes, so you might not even receive compensation, things like those. There is a lot of direct economic and indirect economic risks and liabilities. The company, the individual, the family lose a lot of money. Insurance company lose a lot of money. Now I'll explain it in the last part of my justification of all this online training, education, whatever it is, that occupational health and safety injuries and diseases, they cost 4% average GDP worldwide. That's average. It is more than that in other nations than other nations. Actually, it's more than that in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere. 4% GDP. I mean, take your income, national income, get 4% of it. Let's say Kenya, if we can do a budget of 2 trillion, it means we have an income of at least maybe 3 trillion, 4 trillion. So if you take 4 trillion and you want to get 4% of that 4 trillion, all right? You see, it is how many millions that we are lost on occupational diseases and injuries. It's a lot of money, my friend. Our budget is in trillion, our income is in trillion. So you come to billions, then after billion you come to millions. Do you know where it will fall? 4%, where 4% will fall? Or do you want us to do it? We can do it. We can do it. We can do it. I have my good Mulikamuizi here. So 4% is 400 times 4 trillion. Trillion is how many figures by 7 zeros? Is it 9? Yes. My friend, that is giving me 160 million. So on average, occupational deaths and injuries cost us 160 million. Direct costs and indirect costs. You may say, no, but there's no money allocated to occupational injuries. How? Where is this 160 million? You don't look at that. As a health systems manager, a health system is more than a health facility. It's more than personal medical care. It's more than that. It is the ambulance that you give a person. It is the first aider, the training that first aider got, the one who attended you. It is the medicine, the pharmaceutical companies that made that medicine, the cost. Right? It is the hospital bill, which all of us we know. It is the cost of time that you've not been at work because you are injured, you're on sick leave. It is the conversion of quality adjusted life years to monetary terms. If you've done economics, you know what quality adjusted life years or disability adjusted life years is. Just the duration of disability converted into a figure. All right? You can say if 5 people get disabled for a week, and for every 8 hours they are supposed to work for 8 hours, and 5 of them they get disabled for a whole week, then you are simply saying each one has been the disability has costed you 8 hours per person. We said how many people? 5. 8 hours per person, and that is 40 people, 40 hours rather, for the 5 people. Alright? Then you multiply again by a week to give you around 280 hours. So the disability adjusted life years is that 280 by approximate. I hope my math is right. Remember, I told you from the beginning, I'm not an actuarial scientist, right? Or a mathematician. I'm like you, man. I'm just like you. Assuming I'm not talking to an engineer or a mathematician or, a statistician, actuarial scientist somewhere. So that's what happens. So that is what we call. So that can be quantified in monetary terms. You can always quantify any risk into monetary terms. So that cost is a lot of money. So that's how serious this issue is. Now, since this issue is serious, what have we done as a nation, as Kenya? What am I doing in construction sector? What is Andayi, Dennis, doing in construction sector? Very important to note that. This is it. Need another sip of my coffee. I don't know if coffee is good for the throat. Maybe I need to take lemon coffee. Now, the construction sector, this is what has happened in the construction sector. Occupational health and safety policies, rather legislations, started back in 1954, if I'm not wrong. Is it 58 or 54? It's 54. So that's when this legislation came in. So the first time there was factories and stuff, the industrialization was not as today. Although when I use the word industrialization, it's like somebody in Japan or China will laugh at me and say, which industrialization are you talking about in Kenya? Which industrialization? But for us, who knows where we have come from? We are industrialized. We have to assert ourselves, man. Nobody's gonna come and clap for us. We have to clap for ourselves. A lot of work has been done. So anyway, I was saying, what happened to this legislation started back in 1954, and there were factories. So there was concern about health of workers, more safety, leave alone even health. There was more concern about safety than health, by the way, because I said, hey, safety is freedom from harm. If you get an injury, it is about your safety. There was no good safety. You are not safe. All right, you are susceptible to injury, physical harm. So safety started before. There was a lot of focus on safety than health, and this was in industries, because most workplaces were industries, and so policy was developed, which was called the Factories Act. Factories. So it was Factories Act. Then as time went by, it was like, factories. Is it the only workplace? People are still getting injured elsewhere without necessarily being a factory. So these other places of work had to be incorporated in policy, so that this was a broader, all-inclusive policy, rather act. So how would you have called that act? It's obvious. You would have called it the Factory and Other Places of Work. That's the name. That's how it was called. All right. Then there's been a lot of development. So many legislation coming up. You'll note there's a lot of legislation in 50s, in 60s, 70s, like the medical examination rules, doc rules. I think there's so many other policies that came, first aid rules, back in the 70s. Now, currently we have a very all-inclusive, comprehensive policy that has incorporated even the self-employed. All right? And this is called the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Thanks to Kibaki. This policy developed as a result of, maybe it was enshrined on the Constitution, the new Constitution. Because after 2007, you realize there were so many laws which were developed, like new laws. There was also many which were reviewed. So there was a lot of subsidiary legislation that came in place in practice because of the new Constitution. Because you have the Constitution, which is a general document that talks about a general, it creates like a platform for you to create other laws. It creates a foundation where you can refer and say, oh, this is talking about everybody has a right to highest standards of attainable health care. So you say, what is highest standards of attainable health care for workers? You need to work on the Occupational Health and Safety Act so that it complements the highest standards of healthcare section in that Constitution. So that's what happened. So we have the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 2007. But that act is more preventive. It looks at the safety of a worker. What can you do to ensure that a worker is safe? A worker is free from danger. Alright? So there is danger. If I may put a line here, there's danger here. Then on this side, there is health. Right? Health. Healthy worker. On this side, there's injured worker or ill worker. Healthy worker, ill worker. This is the boundary. So when you come and hit the boundary, across the boundary, somebody gets injured. So what do you do about these injured people? What do you do? Which policies do you have? So this, you realize the Occupational Safety and Health Act is more preventive. But what about the responsive one? What about a policy that responds? We have so many policies, but one of the way to respond to an injured worker is to compensate that worker, to make sure you give that worker a certain compensation financially, which is equal to the injury and which can sustain that worker for the time that worker would have worked. Alright? So which is this policy? It is called Work Injury Benefits Act of 2007. So those are the main two legislation that govern the occupational health and safety in Kenya. So thank you guys. That is the magnitude of the problem and a little bit of what we have done about it. Welcome to my show. My name is Esala Andayi again. I'm an occupational health and safety officer, and I've also specialized in industrial hygiene, which is part of health and safety, and I've also done healthcare management, and I'm actually a registered clinical officer. So welcome on my show. This was the first video I've just shot. You're welcome to see subsequent video. I keep doing more videos. I find 5 people have watched the video. I'm glad. 10, 1,000, 10,000. Want as many people to watch. And if you find this useful to you, you can invite more people to subscribe. Bye.